we are live in the mob here this week, and we're going to get started here. We're going to turn down that background music just a little bit. And, all right, so here we are. We're live in the mob this week. Glad to have everybody here, see everybody. This week is, we kind of talked that we were going to talk about brakes some. So hopefully we all know how to stop. You know, maybe. I don't know. Do you know how to stop?
Well, I will say this: a big mistake with hot rodders is we uh, we always get the go before we get the whoa,
Oh, yeah. That's true. That's true. We
and we
get the
always
go.
worry about we always worry about the go power, and we forget about the whoa power. But it's a very, very, very important part to have on your cars to have something
Oh,
that's
yeah, most definitely. Uh, so, yeah, I kind of figured we would talk a little bit about stopping power this week. Um, you know, as far as different kind of brakes and whatnot, you know, Hydro Boost versus mechanical versus, you know, just a different kind of brakes that we can have and what we do. You know, you've got vacuum brakes, you got Hydro Boost, and like we said, you got mechanical brakes. I mean, I got mechanical brakes, and you know, I mean, I stand on them pretty hard on the other end, get the car slowed down. Joey, you probably just take a feather, you know, lean on yours, and you start slowing down. Maybe.
well. Let's start off with no. When I first started this process, I did vacuum brakes, and
Right.
I've had the Hydro Boost, and of course I have manual brakes now. So um, again, it's you start off with not so good brakes. Um, my car has definitely it's been budget friendly. I started off with a metric set of brakes back in the day. When you just had a small rotor, a single piston. But one thing about it stopped okay. But when you start adding camshafts and vacuum, then you have no vacuum.
Right. No
Then your
vacuum.
brakes stink, and you start trying to do the check valve and all that other mess, and then you end up spending $350 for a vacuum pump, which
Ooh.
worked great. There is a little different way of plumbing that in. A lot of times they try to make a little T and go to the bottom of the carburetor and then to the pump.
Right.
I just directed mine directly to the vacuum booster, and that way I knew I had 25 inches of vacuum at all times, so the car stopped consistently.
Okay. Yeah. That
And
that'd work.
yeah, and then I decided that sticks out pretty far on that side. And then when I did the Pro Charger deal, I needed to lose a little bit of that, and so the next thing was better, and it was shorter, which was a Hydro Boost. And
Okay.
so by
Now,
far the Hydro Boost gives you a lot more clamping force, and you can overcome not so good brakes, with a better clamping force. So I had small rotors and not great pistons, just OEM stuff, and the car, really it stopped very well with a Hydro Boost system on there. So as you progress, you have to spend a little more money and do a lot of things differently. So, uh, you being a racer and stuff like that, you
oh
start
yeah.
thinking of weight and access, because that's kind of a clustered area over there when you have
Oh.
power steering,
Oh
you have a
yeah.
gearbox, whether it's a manual or a power steering gearbox, and then you put a master cylinder right on top of that, and oh my God, it starts making you wish you were double jointed to change spark plugs.
Right.
So then I went back. I went to manual. So I have a manual brake setup, and so it does stop very well. But it is engineered. I've changed the pedal ratio,
Right.
um, and I've got really good brakes on the car. So
Yeah. Good brakes is a good thing. I think, you know, going to disc brakes is, you know, a big improvement. I think we can all agree that.
hmm
Um, you know, and uh, it makes a difference. You know, whether it's two piston, four piston. Uh, what exactly, because you got a lot more fluid, so you got more clamping force with, you know, less that you have to put behind it. I know, like the aerospace that we run. You said you run the aerospace brakes too.
I have arrows on the front and I have strange on the back. I can
Okay.
explain that story to you, but yeah, but that's what I have.
Okay. The aerospace, they clamp really well. Um, and they slow down the car quite easily, and provide tons of pressure. In the mechanical brake area, they do a great job at what they need to do. And I have manual brakes, and they're race inspired brakes. They're what the 5/8 rotor, and with the aluminum hub. They're lightweight drag race stuff, and it's not
Hmm.
necessarily something that you want to run on the street because they can warp very easily. Um,
Yep.
it's not something that's necessarily intended for long highway drives. I mean, you can do it. People have done it. Um, there's plenty of people that do it, but and I still have drum brakes out back, which the car works, it slows down, it stops. I do not have a proportioning valve. I probably should, but excuse me. Everything seems to work quite well. As far as the vacuum and the Hydro Boost, the vacuum allows for putting more clamping force in, along with the Hydro Boost. It allows to put even more clamping force. I think we were talking earlier. What'd you say the brake force on vacuum you read up on
Yeah, it was
was?
roughly about around 600-700, and then there's a formula for all that stuff. But
Right.
the Hydro Boost on my setup, I had a Hydrotech boost, and it was um, 11-1200,
Mm-hmm.
psi, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but you mentioned something too. Unless you really spend a lot of money, the drum brakes in the rear are not is everybody wants to go to disc, but in a drag race application, they just don't drag. You
Right.
have to
Yeah.
buy really high dollar brakes,
Mm-hmm.
to get them from not dragging. And I have strange in the back because it's the wheels they're double bead locks, so that was the only caliper that I could fit in there, or it was known to fit. And plus, they are strictly a racing thing, and you would
Right.
warp them. So what I have in the front is for street driving, so it's their Pro Street kit.
Right.
So there's no so it's a heavier rotor, not as heavy as a steel. It's aluminum hub, aluminum
Mm-hmm.
rotor, but at least it's more street friendly where you're not warping the rotors and spending a couple of $100 on rotors all the time. So
Right. Right.
um,
Alan Bari, he says he's got has Willwood manual on his race car, um, discs all the way around. He says they're incredible. He says the pads didn't last, but they stopped the car. Um, Now Terry is saying that he's going to have four-wheel disc brakes. How do we figure out what size bore for a disc brake reservoir? Um, as far as the bore, hey, there you go. Uh, the bore, I think a lot of the bores are what, like 7/8,
well,
if I
that's just
remember
more
right,
that's
or
that's
one
more
inch.
pressure. It doesn't
Yeah.
give you more fluid, so it's kind of the master cylinder is kind of the key. It's the brains to the whole deal because that
Mm-hmm.
tells you how much fluid and how much pressure you're going to get. But that's really determined by the brake setup that you have,
Right.
and if you go in and you put in four piston calipers and all of a sudden you got a 7/8 master cylinder, you're not pushing enough fluid
Yeah.
to get those
Yeah. You aren't
calipers,
pushing enough fluid.
pistons to push out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a really to figure out. That would probably be the last thing that I would be getting is the master cylinder. I would get everything else before that.
Right. And in that sense, I would, doing four-wheel disc brakes, you got to look at the fact, like you were saying, Joey. Are you going four piston? Are you going two piston? What kind of, what size of brakes, do you have on it? how big are like we had said, how many pistons are they? What are you looking to do with the car? Just stop it nice and easy. Um, you know, the bigger the bore means more volume, so you can push more brake fluid to make it work, more. On my car right now, I just have, I think I have the 7/8. No, I think I put the 1-inch bore uh, strange master cylinder on it, and that 1-inch bore master cylinder, it actually it works quite well. It pushes enough fluid because aerospace brakes, they're a 4-piston caliper. And they work. They don't give me any issues. Um, Alan Alan Barry, he runs a 1 1/8 on his street car, but his is single piston. So, um, yeah, that I can see how that would probably work pretty well for you, Alan, on a single piston setup. Um,
Well, one other key thing to think about is pedal ratio, because that gives you
oh
the
yeah,
amount of
true.
leverage that you're pushing. And
Yeah, that.
typically, um, those cars are 5.75 to 1 or 6 to 1. So if you can
Mm-hmm.
get, ideally a 7 to 1 is ideally what you want to get. If it's more than that, it's going to be really sensitive. I mean, because you're just adding, and it doesn't take much to do that.
No.
A little thing that I did with mine is I bought the low car brake pedal, and it's a true 6 to 1 pedal ratio, and it
Mm-hmm.
just gives you, plus one of the return spring and all that stuff because it's 60 years old. But I moved mine up, and I got an 8 to 1 pedal ratio in mine, and that helped me tremendously. Mine is an 1 1/8 bore, and I haven't done the back, but the fronts I have checked it at the caliper, and on my manual brake setup, it puts right at 570 per wheel, which is a
Oh,
lot, which is a
yeah,
ton,
that's a lot.
a clamping force.
Now I know,
Um,
Dad. He runs a brake gate pressure gauge in his car to when he sets a line lock on the starting line to put just enough pressure to hold the car, not necessarily like a whole bunch of brake pressure, but just enough to hold the car to keep it from moving. Um, and so he says, he can clamp his according to the line pressure clear up to like 1,200 pounds, but I don't know
mhm.
what that necessarily is the pressure out on the pads. Um, and I know he sets his somewhere around like 200 pounds of line pressure,
Hmm.
just enough to hold the car. So you give you an idea that 200 pounds in the line is actually, less force out there on on the caliper. Um, and Terry was asking, can you go too big of a bore? No, I don't think you necessarily can go too big of a bore. But the thing to remember is that you're going to get, with a bigger bore, you're going to push more fluid a lot faster. So your brakes are probably going to be more responsive. And then, like Joey was saying, your ratio, you might have to, look at the difference in your ratio. Because if you've got it going, pushing too fast, you're going to have a lot of brake pressure instantly, instead of having it kind of gradually ease in. you know you want that brake pressure where it's nice and easy and eases in, instead of just hitting the brakes and boom, you got instantaneous, uh, lock up the brakes pressure. So that's something else that you got to remember when you're using a big bore. Look at your pedal ratio to try and keep that to where it's not going to make a big deal for you.
Yeah, I mean, usually with a power assist brake, you're going to have a bigger bore, and you're going to have less with a manual because you're
Mm.
still trying to move pressure because you have no power assist.
Right.
So that's part of it. But when you start getting into aftermarket things that have multiple pistons, or even some of the late model stuff now on some of these other cars,
Mm-hmm.
you still have to move a lot of fluid, uh, enough fluid to them. But just some other key things, just takeaways that I've had to deal with. I bought one of those reverse bleeders, and
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, changed all the lines in it, did the reverse bleeders, and I tell you, the best way to bleed brakes is stick it up on on some blocks and gravity feed it. I mean, that's just
Yeah. Oh yeah.
definitely bleed the master cylinder good, and then just I mean, I've had more success and less problems with just gravity feeding the system than anything else. So
Um,
save your
Ter-
money instead of spending a bunch of money on a reverse bleeder. I
yeah,
mean,
Terry was asking, trying to figure out if he needs a booster or not. Um, being that he's got a stock type engine, vacuum shouldn't be an issue. He was just trying to figure out, if he needs to use a booster of some sorts. And I guess the biggest thing that I gotta say, if you want that nice cushy brake that you don't have to push up, pump up, then I would probably go with a vacuum brake. Where a manual brake, if you remember correctly, a manual brake it takes a couple of times, sometimes to really get a good amount of stopping pressure. Um, Myself, as far as the drag race application, and Joey's probably similar. When you launch the car, you're sitting there on the line lock, and you already got brake pressure built up, and so when you get to the other end, you don't necessarily have to pump the brakes to get the car to slow down to get the clamping force you need. But keep in mind that stop and go traffic, mechanical brakes, a lot of you guys that are older than me, you remember that mechanical brakes, you kind of give them a 1-2 pump. I mean, they still they work okay on a single push, but a lot of times you used to give them a double pump just to
it's
get
just
them
yeah,
to
it's just
slow
that
down.
feel. If you feel the brake pedal that goes down to the floor a little bit more.
Right.
Well, I mean, me, I'm an automatic, so I use a trans brake,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have to do that. But I will tell you, going through the traps, I hit the brakes really hard, really fast, let off of them just to get the initial inertia down on front of the
Mm-hmm.
car, and then I can do it after that. Because you don't just hit it one time and sit there and build up the heat on the brakes. You hit them one time, then you can tap it down, and you can slow it down pretty good. Um, so I'm getting a parachute, so
Yeah.
that's something coming up. But
pair
anyway,
pair of
I'm not
shoes.
gonna do.
What's wrong with the shoes you got now? I,
Well, that's if I do quarter mile stuff. I don't know, man.
what do
I haven't
you
really
got
decided if I'm
holes
gonna
in
do that or
the
not.
you got holes in the floorboard? Is that why you need a new pair of shoes?
I did, and I fixed those.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there's no Fred Flintstone there. Yeah, I don't know. I
Uh,
may just stick. I'm probably gonna stick with my eighth mile stuff, and I'm good with that. I don't know if
right.
I'll put one on there or not.
Yeah. Well, I know you hit 150, then you need to put a parachute on it for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Terry says he's looking to put a 7-inch booster on it. Just don't want a big boulder underneath the hood. Yeah, you don't necessarily want a big boulder underneath the hood. Um, and there again, the too big of a bore. Double check what the brake booster. It all needs to work together. So you need to, kind of do a real little research on the master cylinder and on the brake booster and see what exactly they call for, what they want, so you can get the right ones.
Yeah, Terry, I would say too, they make either a single disc, usually they're like a 12-inch round vacuum booster, and then sometimes the little minis they're dual diaphragms instead of a single diaphragm, but that's also going to push it way out on the car, on the
Mm,
firewall
yeah,
is
push it
what you're going to
farther
get
out.
into. But yeah, I definitely would figure out what brakes you want to use, and go from there. Um, I don't know. Do you have a GM rear end into that thing, or do you have a
No, Joey
Ford
or
rear end?
not
Or
Joey. Terry has that Ford 88 under there, so he'll
okay,
have
okay.
he'll have the he's got the Chevelle front brakes in it is what he was looking to put in it, and then and then he'll have the Ford
Okay.
Exploder
Okay.
brakes
Yep.
on the back. Um,
That'll work plenty good.
and Joe Miller says Hydro Boost is basically the only way he could clear an LS with coils in the stock position, which I can understand. That
Hmm.
them coils kind of make it up higher to where you got to have a little bit more clearance room. Um, so
And usually that too, that accumulator piston has a lot to do with if it's a standard car or an automatic car, or because
mm-hmm.
that can be moved. If you're looking at it facing, if it's at is it 11 o'clock position or if it's at 5 o'clock? Because if you have tall valve covers, you definitely don't want it down here at the 7 o'clock position,
Mm-hmm.
or that could get in your steering, your column shift as well.
Let's see here. Um, I saw over here. Um, let's see. Yeah, Terry Kennedy says that he has single piston front and drum rears with vacuum master cylinder. Not sure of the size, um, and he still has to pump his like the old style, and they've all bled good. Um, I would I would say probably somewhere in that area, you're probably looking at um, having a large. Would that almost be kind of like if he had too large of a bore, that would kind of cause that issue?
He said he's still having to pump it because he's not getting
Yeah,
enough pressure to override it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, your pedal ratio you can change tons,
Oh,
and
true,
just check your
true.
pedal ratio.
Yeah, the pedal
Check your pedal
ratio.
ratio. That's like an instant. Because your leverage, you're just changing the leverage of that pivotal point
Right. So moving it down would cause it
and
to
move it
push
up.
in
Yeah, move it
faster.
move it up, and it increases your leverage.
Okay,
So if
moving
the
it up
hole's
and
here, you want to move it up, and that makes your pedal longer, gives you
right,
more leverage.
right, more leverage. But it also shortens the travel the rod goes. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. You could always get under there and under the dash and poke an extra hole in the brake pedal arm.
And it
You
doesn't take
know,
much. I mean, it could
no,
be pretty much just right next to each other, just like that. It's all it changes
yeah,
it. Doesn't take much at all.
leave
I
at
want to
least
say
an
these old
eighth of an
cars.
inch though.
I Somebody may chime in, but I'm thinking these cars had two holes in them. One
Yeah, if
was
I remember
for
right.
one was for power brakes and one was for manual brakes on these cars.
Yeah. Let's see here. Um. Yeah, that's another thing. Thoughts on line diameter, 3/16 versus quarter. Um,
Hmm.
you know, eh, the larger diameter, you're going to have more volume per se, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have more pressure. Um,
Yep.
the larger volume, it's going to take more to try and compress that to make it, make the pressure out in the brake, out in the calipers or the pistons. So that's something to think about there. Also, it may having a larger line that may end up kind of affecting your brake pressure as well.
Well,
And I
that kind
think
of goes back to the saying of, if you have a larger line and you have a larger piston, you may not want to be pushing as much fluid just in that one
mhm,
certain area. You may need
right,
pressure to actually
right,
make it, and that's where it's good to stick with a, company like Aerospace or Willwood,
yeah. Well, and
places like that, and just kind of say, hey, this is what I have.
yeah, the other thing to look at when they talk about, when you're talking about the size of the line, you also need to look and see what your calipers accept, or pistons, uh, or wheel cylinders. Sorry, because if they won't accept a larger line, then you're not really going to be able to run a larger line. I think they've got, like going to the rear brakes, I think you run a larger line going back there, but once you get to that T junction, then it pins
Steps
down
down.
to a smaller line. So got to keep in mind that they've got a lot of this stuff scienced out already. So for us to try and go and reinvent the wheel and put a larger line on it, it may not be intuitive. Um,
You can buy pretty much pre-bent lines,
mm-hmm.
not a lot of money, and
Yeah.
replace a lot of these older lines on these cars. Um, I know it's not as fancy to, as a chrome under the hood or anything like that, but you know, man, if you can change the wiring on these cars and change the brake lines, they're 60 something
Okay.
years old cars, man, you're building a better foundation for more
Right.
enjoyment, and it's safer
Right.
driving these cars, and Like I said, it doesn't look as good as some of the stuff that you can put on your car, or headers or anything else. But to
Yeah.
have a car that's sound and have a car that's going to
Mm-hmm.
stop and not create electrical fires, it's
Yeah.
a really good starting point.
And then Joe Miller was kind of asking about stainless versus nickel copper. And to be honest, that's just a matter of what you want to see underneath the hood. What you want to show people that you've spent the money on. If you want to put the stainless lines on there, by all means, go for it. As far as which one is better or worse, I don't think there's really a one that's better than the other. The only thing is, the stainless, should not rust out. But then again, I have a friend who had, I think he spent about, when he bought his pickup, like $1,100 for a set of stainless, step tubes for his truck, and they turned out not being stainless. They ended up being, something that rusted out. So, and the other thing you got to remember is the nickel copper. They're going to bend a little bit easier. They'll be a little bit more, a little bit more forgiving, and they're going to, as far as flaring, they're going to be easier to
Yeah.
flare. You know, where
Yeah,
that.
that's the big thing with the stainless is it's a single because it's harder material, so it's basically a 37-degree flare. But that stuff, if you don't, you have to have the right flaring tool. You're gonna have to use cutters to cut it, and
Right.
sometimes when you're making your own lines, you can get like a little hairline crack in that thing, and that thing will just beat you to death.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if
Yeah.
you do the double flare, which is the OEM stuff, it's a little easier to do. Like you said, it's
Right.
flexible. Um, Again, it's going to be one of those decisions. The other stuff you can buy AN fittings and get away with that instead of
Mm-hmm.
where you just have a ferrule. You can use AN fitting, or you can inverted flare. It's going to be
Right.
pretty much on the other stuff, but that's just going to be another choice, and really the cost.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a
Cost
little bit
too.
more on the stainless.
Yeah. Most definitely. Um, let's
And if
see.
you're doing a roadkill type car,
Yeah.
where you're doing a lot of stuff on the road and things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's you definitely don't want the stainless line, because you
No.
could stop at any O'Reilly's or AutoZone and get you
Yeah.
a tube or something,
It,
and pre-bend a brake line and be done with that. So
yeah.
that's something to think about.
The other thing to look at, is rubber lines versus braided lines. The thing that you got to remember is, like Joey says, if you're something that you're driving and driving distances and going long ways, it might be a better off to look at the rubber type lines rather than a stainless, because that's stainless, like Joey and I, we've got aerospace brakes, and our soft lines, the stainless braided, they come from aerospace, and that's what they want with their brake. I'm sure we could probably go to O'Reilly's or something and find something that would work, but it's something that you're going to have difficulty finding, where the rubber lines, that most, as long as what the brake lines came off of, like if Terry's going to use brakes off of a Chevelle, then he just needs to go in and say, hey, I need a left rubber, the rubber flex hose from the block on the frame to the caliper, you know, then he knows what he needs, and he can go in and just tell him what he needs and get what he needs. Whereas, well, I need a stainless line for this car, and they're
Yeah.
gonna, at O'Reilly's, they're gonna ask you, well, is it 2 or 4 wheel drive? And oh, does it have windshield wipers? And then you're gonna go out of there like, okay, I don't have what I need, and I'm not gonna get what I need. So, you know,
Yeah, you're not going to find a 3/32 you know, line or quarter-inch
no,
line, whatever. It's just that's a good question though. It's a good question, but I mean that's kind of what we're just talking about our experiences
mm-hmm,
and giving you guys options to say, hey, this is a choice that you can make.
right. John Liddick says he will not use rubber lines in a manual setup, which that's understandable. That's a personal preference. You know, I can understand the thoughts of rubber line expanding and contracting, and for the most part, the chances of a stainless steel braided line, um, you know, going bad on you are slim, but it's still something to think about. Is the ability to, if you get in a bind and you need to have brakes, fix something and you're out on the road, you know, setting it up with rubber lines, is something that you can definitely be able to go into the store and pick up, where the stainless lines are going to be harder to pick up. So, so anyways, so we didn't really get a talk here at the beginning about how each other's weekends went. How did your weekend go?
Uh, it was good. Yeah, I went to the gambling boats with Debbie, and
Right.
I mean, we each took $100, and we
Mm-hmm.
both came back with little over $100. So,
Yeah, that's
good
not bad.
times. Yeah, you know, paid for our meal,
Yeah.
gas there, so it wasn't a bad deal.
Yeah, not
And
bad at all.
played some. There's a little arcade place up here. I'm sure there are other places too, but it's like the old games like Defender and
Mm-hmm.
Frogger and all of that. So we just went and hung out and um, had some fun. Had old pinball machines, so they had some like the really really old pinball machines. So it was fun.
Right.
That was about
Uh,
it.
okay. Joe Miller asked real quick if he's having an axle spec, is it necessary? Is a parking brake necessary? Well, um, I guess here's my school of thought here, Joe. If you plan to be where you might be parking on, any of the car shows that are local to you, that you think you might be parking on a hill, which car shows, I don't know of any car shows that are really to where you're going to be parking on any kind of a real steep incline. I mean, your streets have that kind of a crown to them, so you're going to park on a little bit of a grade there, but for the most part, um, a lot of people don't put a parking brake in the cars anymore. If you walk through a car show, most of the modified cars that you look at, you really don't see a parking brake in them unless it's like something that came with a handbrake in the center console or whatever. They might still have that in there. And a parking brake, it's kind of a 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. You kind of got to decide if you're really going to be using it, if you need it that much, and if you do need it, then yeah, I would put it in. But
That's extra weight for me, and I
yeah,
drive an automatic, so I just keep mine in gear.
yeah,
So, and I don't usually park on hills. I would say I know it's kind of cheesy, but I just carry me a block of wood in my back if I was parking on a bunch of hills. I just make my own chalk. I just stick it on there, make me feel safe.
um, you know, and there Terry was saying, standard transmission need an e-brake. The thing of it is, where Terry, where you're going with, um, I was a T5, I think that you were kind of looking at. The gear ratios that are in those things, either reverse or first. When you park it in one of those gears, that thing probably isn't going to roll down a hill because you know, the gear ratios, they kind of work backwards when it goes towards the engine. So, if you park it in first or reverse, it's going to hold it. And so I wouldn't necessarily worry about an e-brake in a manual car. An automatic, yeah, an automatic can get by without it. The thing of it is, you got to remember that if you're on a hill, something really, really steep, to where you actually want a uh, park brake. The thing you got to remember with an automatic is there's a chance of shearing off the park ball. Um,
Yeah.
but for how often we drive these things on, I don't really see us parking on terribly steep hills. So there again, I still got to say, it's a personal preference. Me and Joey, we don't have park brakes in the car because I mean that's extra weight. It slows us down. So
Plus, when you got a 4-inch drive shaft underneath it, that's you start getting into issues to where that thing hangs.
Right.
because
Right.
honestly, I had to take my whole parking brake assembly out, as low as the car is to actually, slide a
Right.
4-inch drive aluminum shaft in there, and
Yeah.
it's a booger to get out. So there's no way I could have gotten that in and out with the parking brake in there. And like I said, just that's something to think about. If it's a smaller drive shaft, a 3-inch, I mean, it doesn't seem
Right.
like a lot, but it is a lot, or smaller than that.
Let's see. Dave Cat says he cannot remember the last time he used a parking brake. I can't remember the last time I used a parking brake other than in my pickup. Like once a year, I'll
Backing up trailers,
push it, and
exactly. If you're
push it and
backing up a
release
trailer
it.
by yourself, and
Yeah.
you can look at the camera and you want to make sure that as soon as you put it in park, it rolls. I use a parking brake on my tow rig,
Yeah.
but as
The
far as a hot rod, I haven't used one in a long.
the
Well,
the only time that I really used a parking brake was in my pickup. I use it once in a while, like once a year, just to make sure that it's not sticking. I'll run it once just to you know make sure it's not giving me any issues. Um,
plus on
eh,
my application, I have a big old A-pillar bar that runs right down there where you can't pull the brake.
mhm.
It's right there. So
Yeah, mine too. Um, and Terry Kennedy was asking, how do you tell the bore size when it's installed? You really can't tell the bore size when it's installed. That's something that, if there's some sort of a part number or whatever on it, you could go to the auto parts store and have them look it up by the part number and have them tell you, see if they can tell you what size bore is in it. As far as telling what size a bore is once it's installed, I really don't know. And besides, the other thing you got to remember, um, on that backside is that the plunger on the backside is, if I remember right, isn't it usually larger?
yeah, so the piston itself, it may say like a 1-inch bore piston, but it's not really a 1-inch bore. So
Mm-hmm.
it's done by you know, here comes your math. Your pi r square. That's your squared. That's actually how big the piston really is. It's not really a 1-inch. It's a little less than that.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you wouldn't be able to because of that thing on the back. You wouldn't be able to see. It'd just have to be a part number.
Yeah. And that Joe, the 480E, it should be just fine. Like he says, the biggest thing is in an automatic, the engine isn't holding the car. It's the park ball inside of the transmission that's holding it. So, that's not necessarily something that that's really going to have any effect on it. You know, uh,
I mean, basically that's a 400 turbo with an
mm-hmm,
overdrive, and most of
right.
the some of the parts, on they interchange. They do interchange. Some things are better on an 80
Mm-hmm,
that they incorporate into a 400, and then there's other things on a 400 that are work better. The Sprag, for instance, a better deal when you put it in a 80 with a 400. So instead of running a
right.
32, you run a 36 Sprag. So, and there's just a lot more aftermarket parts for that. But yeah, there's not a. I mean, I ran an 80 for years, no parking brake. I mean, I didn't try to park on hills. I mean, there were some gradual things, but I
Right.
never had any issues with it at all.
Yeah, and John Liddick reminded me of something that some master cylinders do have a different bore between front and rear. Um,
Like a step down, isn't it? Something like that. I think there
yeah,
is a step down.
yeah, if I remember right. You know, so that's and that's something that when you get into it, you look at it. If you're going to get something that's got a step bore, then you got to just keep that in mind. You know, um, so yeah. And then John Powell, reminds us all of driver head or driver ed. When you're going uphill, um, you turn the wheels out, and when you're going downhill, you turn your wheels in. So that way it cuts into the curb and stops the car. But like I says, as far as the emergency brake, it really just needs to be something that you kind of decide what you need, what you want, what's going to be best for your application. Where, like I says, where Joey and I are, it's extra weight for us, so we're not necessarily going to use a parking brake at all. I mean, in theory, it probably would be a good idea to have it on there just for the simple fact, like, if the brakes were to fail, where Joey, he could probably, if without the park brake, he can probably shut the car off and leave it in gear, and that should draw it down some. And me, I can shut the car off and leave it in gear and start slipping the clutch to slow the car down. Um, you know, so and those
I
are
mean,
all
most of
things.
these, yeah, most of the stuff we're doing eighth mile stuff, and most of the tracks are pretty long. Um,
Joe Miller
yeah, so
asked if he could.
you got plenty of time. I will tell you the
Yeah.
one that I go with to a lot is XRP, and
Hmm.
it's huge.
Right.
But when you get to you miss the first one. I think the first one's so early. When you're going
Yeah.
130, 140, it's really hard to make that one, I guess, with a car's brake. But it only has
Right.
one other one, and I mean, it's like as soon as it turns, and they've got a wide loop, but as soon as it turns, I mean, the sand pit's right there. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
if you miss that, you're in the sand.
Yeah.
You go to an NHRA track. I mean, oh my God, it's forever when those guys are
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Joe Miller said, "Could I just get a line lock for the rear?" uh, well, yes and no. Line locks are just a temporary, a momentary. They're just a momentary switch that locks the brake pressure. Usually locks it to the front wheels, and they're only intended to be used for a short time. They're an electromagnet, so if you sit there and have have a switch on them, and hold them for a long period of time, it's going to drain the battery, and it's probably going to burn up the line lock. Um,
yeah,
I
thing's
don't.
only got like a 5 amp fuse on it. It's
Yeah,
not
I don't.
very robust at all.
Yeah, I don't see a line lock being a good use to hold the car, as far as um, for what you call it, for e-brake, no, or for a parking brake, no. That's not a good day, good
They
way.
used to have a thing like on a lot of tow vehicles where it was, um, but it was made. I remember my dad had a record, so you could actually pull it, and it would lock all
Hmm.
the four wheels down. So if you were pulling something with a winch,
Right.
and I'm trying to think what that was called, but I remember that you had to set it. You push the brake down kind of like you do a line lock,
Hmm.
and then you pull that lever, and it actually just held the pressure
Okay.
to it. But I don't remember what it was called, and I'd have to really look into it and see if it was. It may have been electric. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I know the little line lock we have is just a little, small little thing.
John Liddig says just use vice grips on those junk rubber hoses.
Hey, if you are worried about stopping, just put a parachute on your car and be done with it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, but as far as the stopping on, holding it on a hill, yeah, for the most part, most of us aren't going to be parking our hot rods on a hill or anything. So, me personally, I probably wouldn't put a e-brake on it or a parking brake. I'd be all right with that. So,
So let me say something too that we kind of missed on some of this.
mm-hmm.
Everybody, well, majority of people like skinny front tire, the drag race look with a fat tire in the
Right,
back. Um, it's great to have brakes and think about just on the front, but you remember you only have a little skinny tire, so there's only that
right,
much of a surface contact point that you're trying to stop, and you got a big fat tire in the back, and so those have got to work too. And
right.
we always think of stopping on the front, but when you think about that skinny front tire in the front, it looks cool and all that, but um, yeah, it definitely doesn't leave you a big contact patch
Right.
to actually stop your car.
Yeah, that's something else to remember. When you're looking at stuff. If you got the skinny tires up front, you got to remember you don't have as much contact. So that is very true. So skidding skinnies. No, I I don't know. Yeah, you could skid them pretty easily, Daniel Martin. But if you hit the brakes properly, you'd be all right. So, well, any other
What other
thoughts?
questions we got?
Well, I don't know. I'm not seeing a whole lot of other questions. Here we
It
were
looks like we had some
talking.
good participation tonight, so hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Here we were talking earlier. We didn't know if we were going to have a 45 minutes of content, but we we seem to have quite a bit of good content yet tonight, so that's pretty good.
So I will say today, I met Joe Miller today, and
Okay.
he actually works in the same town as I work at, so it was
Mm-hmm.
good to see him at, and he's got a little Ford pickup with LS swap in it. It's
Okay.
pretty cool looking, man. Yeah, it sits good. It's yeah, maybe he'll. I think he showed a picture of it on the mob, but um, it's a badass little truck. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe he'll do something live feed or something on it, walk around it or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, it's pretty
Uh,
cool. But
Joe
it's always good
Miller.
to run into somebody, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, Terry's on my list to go down and see Terry. So since he's in the state of Texas, and then who else is it? Daniels in Weatherford? Who's in Weatherford?
I don't know. If you're in Weatherford, go ahead and comment.
Yeah,
Um,
give a comment. So
Joe Miller asked that Strange is the only brand that cleared at the time. Are there any other brands that clear now? Or it's just mostly because of the bead lock, wasn't it? That they.
yeah, it's because of the inside beadlock. So after I bought what I have on the front, they said, "Hey, we've got some too." I just never got anything from Willwood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just said, "Hey, I've got this wheel, Billet Specialties wheel with a double beadlock," and well, we don't know. They just would never guarantee it, so that's why I ended up doing the Strange. Um, but yeah, I'm sure they have one.
Right.
It's I'm trying to remember going to see another car that had them, and most of the other cars either had the strange brakes. Most of them had strange brakes, but they're all mostly all full race cars too, so they
Right.
had them strange all the way around.
Uh, Sorry, I'm not trying to leave dead air here. I'm trying to respond to John Liddick. John Liddick asked to send a picture of your 4-inch shaft in the car, and I was just telling him to message you directly. Uh,
Yeah, the
Cause
car's
I
at the
didn't.
body shop, so it's not in my garage.
So.
But I'll tell you, hang on a second. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Can you still see me?
Well, I can see you, but they can't see you.
Okay, hang on. Let me see. It's
Uh,
paid by.
let's see.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, they can't hear you either. Just so you know, he's Joey ran away to go look at his drive shaft, so
No, I didn't
he'll
because it's
he'll be
not.
back
Remember?
shortly. So.
No, the car's at the body shop. I was thinking it was a place out of Florida. I called Strange to get a drive shaft for my car for the
Right.
RPMs and the horsepower, and they sent me to this place, and I'll have to look it up and tell you what it is.
Right.
But it was about $800, about $800 to get a drive shaft here.
Okay. Man. Oh, come on.
But that was with a forged in too on a Strange forged in, of course, with
Right.
1350 U joints solids.
Right. Okay. Let's see here. Uh, I hope this is all working like it should. Um, let's see. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty here on the Facebook side of the computer. Let's see here. Um, okay, Christopher Files wanted to know hydraulic clutch is better than a stock setup. If you're just street driving it, then Christopher, hydraulic would probably be a little bit better setup, and Craig would. Craig actually has a mechanical clutch on it, and actually, Christopher, um, I will allude to. We're trying to get a guest in here that actually specializes in the hydraulic clutch setup. There's be watching here in future weeks, Christopher. We got a guest that we're trying to get on the show that will come in and kind of talk a little bit about hydraulic clutches versus mechanical clutches. I like the mechanical clutch because everything, you got there's less lag time, so the clutch comes out quicker and faster, in my personal opinion, than a hydraulic. So, um, that um, that it works faster in my opinion for the drag race application. So, um, and that's each his own. But as far as the street driving, I wouldn't. I would think that a street drive would probably be, you know, a good setup for that. Joe Miller kind of want to know our thoughts on the shoe material. And there again, the shoe material. You got to look at what you're going to be doing necessarily. If it's just a street driver, you don't necessarily need your big expensive pads. If you're doing something like Joey and I, where you're drag racing, where a semi-metallic may be a better material, because you got more biting power, more grip, than the semi-metallic, would probably be better. And
Yeah, the more brass in the pad, the faster it stops. But it
right,
also eats away the surface too. So
it does eat away the surface too. And the other thing, it's got more grab, with less pressure. The other thing is Keith Hyder wanted to know what kind of horsepower we were running. And we don't necessarily tell people how much horsepower we're running, unless Joey wants to tell people how much power he's making.
mine makes 1,500.
Okay, yeah. Mine's nowhere near that, but I can always hope and dream someday. So, but I think for this week, I think we are about ready to wrap up. I do thank everybody for their participation this week, and I thank everybody for commenting and asking questions, because it does mean a lot to us. It helps us know that you guys are out there listening and talking and asking questions. And I appreciate you guys being here listening. Everybody that does watch this at a later date on YouTube, I do ask that you like, comment, and share. And those of you in the mob, if you can go over there, I'll provide the link later. If you guys can go over and like, comment, and share, it just helps to grow the channel and gets people knowing that we're out there. So, any final thoughts?
I mean, let me say something about horsepower. A lot of people get caught up in numbers, and it's really not about numbers. You would think you really don't need that much horsepower to make it. So a good
Right.
rule of thumb: if you take a 3,200 pound car and you can put 1,000 rear wheel horsepower to it, it'll run 480s. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, and then it's really where the power comes in. You can make a lot of things that make peak horsepower, but really it's just where it comes in. If you can get horsepower fit fast and keep it steady across, you'll just be faster.
Right.
Instead of wait for it to wind out to get to that. So,
Yeah.
I know cars that make less horsepower than I do and are faster. They're lighter. They're just
Yeah.
lighter cars.
Lighter cars
You
make
know,
faster. So, all right.
so
Well, we're going to sign off for the night. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joey, for being my co-host this week. And I'll see about getting a framework that says Joey instead of Craig. And hopefully everybody will quit teasing Craig and saying Craig's looking better. But
hey, Craig's got hair. How about that?
yeah, oh boy, you got hair. What'd you do? Did you get Miracle Grow up there?
I did put some Miracle Grow up there.
All
I
right.
put Miracle Grow. And I got more hair, but I got shorter.
Ah. All right. With that, we will see you guys later. Have a good one. Thanks for
All right.
watching.